Well, good morning, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to the Third Symposium organized by the Ukrainian Umbrella Association of Psychotherapy and the European Association for Psychotherapy. And for this symposium, we are so very pleased to also be collaborating with the Czech Association for Psychotherapy, and we thank them for everything that they have done to help in the preparation of this symposium and indeed the funding of this symposium. Welcome if this is the first time you've joined a symposium, or the second time, or the third time, because we know that there are people who have come to each of these symposiums, and this is really, really important. There are 1,200 people have registered for today's symposium, and I think that people will be joining us over the next few minutes as we start this symposium. Our symposiums unite us. They are bringing us together. They are connecting us. And this is a really significant and important thing in a world where disconnectedness is quite a problem. So we are united and connected through these symposiums. European psychotherapists and Ukrainian psychotherapists connected with each other. And this is a really important and significant thing. And we are thrilled to see the ways in which you are all connecting with us. I'm going to introduce the people giving the opening addresses now. The first opening address will be given by Dr. Olena Dobrodnyak, who is the president of the European Association for Psychotherapy. Then she will be followed by Professor Roman Kechor, who is representing the Ukrainian Umbrella Association for Psychotherapy. And then the third opening address this morning is from Jirka Drohota, representing the Czech Psychotherapy Association. So we'll begin our opening addresses now with Olena.
Good morning, Pat. Good morning, everybody. And really, I would like to greet you on behalf of European Association for Psychotherapy, EAP, as we have all these short names for all different national organizations and committees in EAP. I just wanted to say the whole world so that we have it as a fact that this is European event, and it is a European association who is part of the organization, together with the Ukrainian National Organization and Czech National Organization. I'm very happy to be witnessing this progress in this symposium, and especially that now the Czech organization joined in. It is a proof that solidarity and connectiveness and joint efforts to do something together is giving a fruits, let's say. And I'm sure that this is also the recipe for Europe. If we do talk to each other, if we work together. You know, a lot of people are talking, especially politicians, and giving speeches with a very nice declarations, but if you have something like this where we work together and have not just declarated mutual understanding, but spending time together the whole day, discussing important things connected with the situation now in Europe and crisis times, which are now all around, I would say. And I think this coming together and being together is a big resource, and it's really something which can help to stand crisis and to know that we are not alone. So this is, for me, quite a big thing to have this symposia. And it means also that European psychotherapist is not just a word, but it is really something which is becoming a truth through this connectiveness which we produce here. It is all about dialogue and exchanging experiences as it is in the psychotherapy. So I wish you a very good day, interesting exchange with the colleagues and interesting lectures, and happy that we are all together.
Thank you very much, Irena, for your wise opening words. That's excellent. And now, please, Professor Roman Kachur is going to give an opening address on behalf of the Ukrainian Umbrella Association for Psychotherapy. Good morning, Roman.
Good morning, dear colleagues. I will be concise because I know for sure that all participants of all similar conferences dream about short, welcoming speeches, so I will be short and concise. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the Ukrainian side, I have the honor to welcome our European Ukrainian Symposium. This is our third public meeting, behind the scenes of which there have been thousands of meetings of the Joint Working Group. I would like to start with gratitude. We thank our partners from the European Association of Psychotherapy, Dr. Irena Besic, President of the European Association of Psychotherapy, and former EAP President Patricia Hunt. We thank our other colleagues who spent time during for our common work. We thank our Czech colleagues. The President of the Czech National Association of Psychotherapy, Jirka Dragota, has given a new impetus to our efforts. I would also like to thank the President of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel, for providing patronage for our previous symposium. And most importantly, I want to thank the armed forces of Ukraine. Thanks to their struggle, we have this opportunity to talk about humanism and psychotherapy. I would like to congratulate all the participants of the symposium, to welcome them and wish them creative and fruitful work. Glory to Ukraine and prosperity to Europe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, dear Roman. Thank you for bringing in the whole of your country, the whole of your current situation, which is at the heart of our work together and bringing us together to unite our strengths in support of what is happening. Thank you so much. And now, Jirka, please will you give an address on behalf of the Czech Association for Psychotherapy?
Dear colleagues, milí kolegové, doroгі kolegy, dear European psychotherapists, today is a national holiday in the Czech Republic. On 17th November, 34 years ago, the revolution that ended 40 years of unfreedom began. In the days before that, there seemed to be no hope. A man imprisoned at the time wrote, "Hope is not the certainty that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something has meaning, no matter how it turns out." It was our first president, Václav Havel, and I hope he won't mind if we add him as a patron of this symposium. As psychotherapists, we are trained to await hope, even when the rest is gone. So it is the duty of psychotherapy to keep the light of hope alive. So let us also support ourselves today to be lanterns for this light. And when it goes out, let us light it for each other. Dear colleagues, milí kolegové, dorohí kolegy, it is an honor and a joy to be with you today in the European psychiatric community, a psychotherapeutic community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Jirka, and it is an honor and a joy to work with you and on these symposiums and within the working group of colleagues who have organized these symposiums. And I really like your words to us about hope, and that hope isn't something that's far off in the future. Hope is now, and hope is about meaning now. And we hold the light of hope, and when needed, we help to keep each other's light of hope alive. Thank you for your words to us this morning. Thank you. And now, just on time, we turn to our first presentation of the day. So I would like, Martinez, if you could bring Professor Marek Preiss alongside me on the screen so that I can introduce him to everyone. Good morning, Professor Preiss. It is a great honor to us that you have joined us in the symposium this morning, and it's very good to meet you. Thank you so much for being with us. I will just introduce you, and then we look forward to your presentation to us. So Professor Marek Preiss teaches the psychology of adjustment and theories of personality at the University of New York in Prague. He works in clinical psychology and is a researcher at the National Institute of Mental Health. And he publishes in his research on stress, cognitive testing, personality disorders, and also through the Raphael Institute, he's developing research into the topic, and the really important topic, of transgenerational transmission of trauma. And so his lecture this morning is going to focus on the topic of transgenerational transmission of trauma in the context of war. And so this is so central, so important to us at this time in Ukraine. So, Professor Preiss, we look forward very much to your presentation to us this morning. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much too for such a nice introduction, and it's a big honor for me to prepare a presentation for this audience. I will try to share the presentation, and I hope technically it will work for everyone. Yeah, it seems it works. So I will speak about transgeneration transmission of trauma. My name is Marek Preiss. I'm clinical psychologist. I'm working at the National Institute of Mental Health. It's a big research institution in Czech Republic. And I'm also working as a teacher at the University of New York in Prague. And I am very glad that for this presentation, I was supported by Visegrad Fund, because we have a small project with colleagues from Poland, Hungary, Slovak Republic, and we are working together on a topic of transgeneration transmission of trauma, and we are exchanging experiences. Well, for me, everything started in the 90s. Helena Klímová, Czech psychotherapist, put us together, us Czech psychotherapists who were relatively young, who started with psychotherapeutic practice. Some of us started with psychotherapeutic trainings. And she looked at people with Jewish origin, with possible transgeneration issues back to previous generations. And she tried to train us with support of foreign psychotherapists with similar background, and she gave us first knowledge about this issue. So this group of Czech psychotherapists started to work together, and we were educated, and we tried to cooperate with each other, and we tried to understand more what is going on issues like trauma, Holocaust survivors, first, second, and the third generation, and also transgeneration transmission of trauma. I would like to say at the beginning that in Czechoslovakia there are roots of Jewish people who were involved in transgeneration transmission, especially Leo Eitinger, born in 1912, Czech Jew, Holocaust survivor, and physician who spent his life dedicated to the consequences of imprisonment and other traumas. Also, Helen Epstein, I would recommend her books to everyone who wrote Children of the Holocaust, famous textbook, which is about especially second generation of Holocaust survivors. There are vivid explanations, case studies. And of course, Sigmund Freud, native of Příbor, everyone knows him. I would like to start with stress diathesis model for PTSD, which is probably known to most of us, and it gives us some clue who will suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder if he or she experience trauma. And there are three important variables. The first one is exposure to trauma, because it's well known that it's not unimportant if there are repeated expositions, like several traumas during our early childhood, or a chain of traumas during the wars, like Second World War was. And it's important to connect exposure to trauma to previous life experiences. There was probably better chance for Holocaust survivors to cope with traumas from Second World War if their previous pre-war life was relatively peaceful, in a good environment, in functioning families. Second important variable are, of course, genetic predispositions. You might guess what kind of variables in clinical psychology and psychology itself is a background variable for genetic predispositions. It's, of course, what we call neuroticism in our practice, and what is also connected with extraversion and impulsivity. So it could be expected that people with higher level of extraversion, a high level of impulsivity, might be more prone to experience PTSD connected with trauma. But neuroticism is the most important. Tendency to perceive fear, to be pessimistic, to feel that there might be no successful future, and so on. These people who are prone to anxiety disorders and depressive disorders are also more prone to experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And the last variable is what we call subsequent social support. So how social support is given to us after trauma. And this is connected with research also. It seems that it's not unimportant if people from Central and Eastern Europe after the Second World War emigrated to United States, Canada, or to Israel with maybe better care for Holocaust survivors and more monuments and more care given to first generation. So social support seems to be extremely important. But I am now speaking about trauma. But the trauma may start and may stop during our lives. So it's not so common that the trauma is a consequence for something what is transgenerational. What are the risk factors for trauma becoming transgeneration? So the first factor is unshareability or silence. Either the fact of the gravity of the trauma is questioned, the traumatized individual or group is left alone with the experience which they cannot share with family members, friends, or the broader environment. And the trauma is silenced at the societal level too. The second variable is the absence of others sharing the same fate. The victim or group of victims is left alone. The victim has the experience that the closer and wider environment doesn't feel what he or she feels. It lacks empathy, and its humanity becomes almost questionable. The third factor is absence of safe milieu. The processing of trauma is possible only in a safe milieu, including the milieu in the closer sense, family, friends, and the broader environment, society. The fourth factor is absence of narrative. The individual is able to integrate the experience and thus to reintegrate the self if the environment, family, society is also capable of this. Thus, the event can be integrated into the life story and it becomes narratable. If the experience cannot be integrated, there are split off and the individual's image of themselves and consequently their self-narrative becomes fragmented. And the last factor for a trauma becoming transgenerational is damage to the mourning process. Because of the splitting of the experience, in the absence of continuous narrative, the experience cannot become a memory and the normal mourning process is damaged. So we have 5 factors how trauma might become transgenerational. What is the definition? Intergeneration or transgeneration, intergeneration is between 2 generations and transgeneration comes over several generations. Transmission is a phylogenetically developed adaptation mechanism, a survival mechanism by which the offspring are prepared for danger and pre-informed about the dangers. It seems a bit strange, and here is an example how previous transgeneration psychotherapists like Anne-Céline Schutzenberger, French psychotherapist, was thinking about it. So she was thinking about what she called anniversary syndrome in psychiatry. We will speak about it later. Anniversary in terms of that something repeats during time, and it's not by a chance, it's connected with dates, with anniversary. And she wrote, I have found the same mechanism in operation among cancer patients in the case of accident going back 3 or 5 generations, and also in certain illnesses linked to the upper respiratory tract, such as bronchitis, asthma, or tuberculosis. For example, patients will be coughing and spitting, reproducing the symptoms of a grandfather gassed in World War I at Ypres in 1915 or at Verdun 1916, about a century ago. So we might feel how strange it is. So there are some mechanisms, some experiences, some secrets that might appear again even many years later, even several decades, 100 years, something like that. Transgenerational transmission are not spoken about quite often. They are secrets, unspoken, kept quiet, hidden events, which are sometimes banned even from thought. Sometimes they are unthinkable, and they are passed down from generation to generation without being thought about or assimilated. Again, it's a quotation from Schutzenberg's famous textbook, The Ancestor Syndrome, Transgenerational Psychotherapy and the Hidden Links in the Family Tree. There are some models of transgeneration transmission. Here is the model done by Danieli, famous researcher in this field, the so-called multidimensional, multidisciplinary integrative framework. So the idea is that someone is coming through really difficult times, like being imprisoned during the Second World War, let's say. And I would have some past, something how I was raised up. I have some young age. I have some memories about my family. And so I'm going through myself, through family background, some broader social background, through my culture, nation, and even international connections, and I become a victim. There is a big shift, and so because of big shift, big change, big trauma, I am cut off from my past, from my family, from my past self. And so this is the trauma. And if I am lucky and if I survive, I'm coming back home again, how people came home after the Second World War. And what happened typically was that this trauma lasted. Even if those people had to be brave, they had to came back, they have to start work quite often immediately. They didn't have enough time to process the traumas. And common consequence of such severe trauma was conspiracy of silence, which is broadly described in scientific and psychotherapeutic literature. And it seems this is the most common mechanism how to cope with severe traumas done by wars. Conspiracy of silence. If these people were lucky, the self started to heal itself by better times, by better consequences, by marriages after war, by setting up new families, by building new future, and so on. But still the self is impaired even many decades after the war. So this is a general transgenerational transmission model, how trauma might be processed by decades. I will speak about Holocaust mainly during this presentation, but it should be mentioned that so-called historical trauma is everywhere. Here is an example from Canada. 50 years of colonization, and more than half of indigenous children are still in foster care. And so this is the legacy of history, and different historians, psychotherapists, sociologists are interested in this because we might see the impact of trauma from something what last 500 years, and it diminish culture identity, it might decrease resilience, and it might negatively impact physical and mental health. I will now speak about three meta-analyses because these meta-analyses tell us much about our possibilities and are in contravention with psychotherapeutic knowledge. So it's good to hear also the second side, the research. The first meta-analysis was studied by Efrat Barel from University of Haifa, and his interest was to look at thousands of people, Holocaust survivors, but not immediately after the war, but decades later. You might notice that this paper was published in 2010, so more than 5 decades after the war. The title is Surviving the Holocaust, a meta-analysis of the long-term sequel of a genocide. And Barel, with colleagues, tried to put together 71 different samples from different studies, more than 12,000 participants, first generation Holocaust survivors. And he was interested in adjustment. He looked at adjustment from different angles. Especially he was interested in quality of these studies, so research, design, quality of previous studies. He was interested in age, because maybe it's not sudden if we are children during the war or if we are adults. Maybe also it's not maybe there might be some differences between small children and older children. Also, country of residence was his interest, because there might be emigration effect. Maybe it's not sudden, and if people emigrated from previous country of residence, if they stayed, for example, in Ukraine or in former Czechoslovakia, or if they moved to West Europe or to the United States, or if they moved to Israel. Also, target population was of interest for him, because many studies were done on clinical population or on different psychotherapeutic groups or convenience sample. And maybe it's important if these people are participants from more general population, or if they are the part of targeted clinical population. Also, sex was of interest, because maybe women might suffer more from traumas than males. It's based on previous research. We know that females score higher on different instruments of depression and anxiety. Also, generally, harm avoidance dimension, which is close to neuroticism, which was included into that previous model I tried to show you. Women score typically higher in these dimensions. Barel was interested in broad categories of adjustment, like psychological well-being, post-traumatic stress symptoms, cognitive functioning, physical health, stress-related physiology, and what is called psychopathological symptomatology. Here are some basic results. Probably you know D score, effect size. If effect size is higher, like close to 1, it means that there is a large difference between experimental sample. For us here, Holocaust survivors, the first generation, are so-called experimental sample, and control group. Control group in this meta-analysis were Israelis or Jews from the United States, Canada, and other countries. So population similar in origin, but not impacted by the war, like, for example, Jewish who emigrated in the 19th century to the United States, and so on. There were simple measures of adjustment, like, for example, for well-being it was Tennessee self-concept, or for post-traumatic stress it was impact of event scale, simple scale, which use criteria from ICD or DSM. Psychopathology was measured by symptomatic scales, like SCL 90 or famous Beck Depression Inventory, which is focused on all aspects of major depressive symptoms. Somatic health was measured by blood pressure, for example. There was interest in cognitive functions, because we know that trauma might impact cognitive functioning. And because these people, first generation, were older, the issue was, for example, mini-mental state examination, screening method of cognition, or much more detailed Wechsler IQ test. There were also physiological reactions measured in connection with stress, like cortisol level. What were the results? we can see here that D overall total adjustment is relatively low. And after some other statistical operations, it even lowered. So it's relatively, it's possible to interpret it as a relatively small impact if we compare controls and experimental sample. What else was found in this meta-analysis? Female, according to expectations, had worse adjustment in this study. Also, it was found that people who emigrated after Second World War to Israel had better adjustment in comparison with control sample. Also, it was found that it's important how we choose the sample. Sample created by psychotherapeutic groups had worse impact than what is called non-selected samples, like participants derived from general population, survivors who were not parts of psychotherapeutic groups or some kind of psychotherapeutic treatment. Also, of course, people who were treated, who received antidepressants, for example, anxiolytics, had worse adjustment than controls. And also it was found that people who were children during the war had worse impact, worse adjustment even after 50 years later. So the result is that there is some impact, but the impact is relatively small, and it was a big surprise. How is it possible that the impact is relatively small and researchers want to look more at these variables? This figure shows us different categories of adjustment: total adjustment, physical adjustment, psychological well-being. What is of interest for us is the middle bar here, which shows post-traumatic symptoms. And the 0 level is the control sample. So we might notice that post-traumatic stress symptoms are very prominent in experimental sample in comparison with controls, and it's not important if participants for the study are derived from general sample, general population, or from convenient samples like psychotherapeutic groups, clinical settings, and so on. So it seems that post-traumatic stress symptoms are signs which we should focus on even decades after the war. Researchers were not satisfied with the results. How is it possible that the first generation doesn't have such a big impact how it was predicted? So second meta-analysis was conducted. Are children of Holocaust survivors, so second generation, less well adapted? It was a meta-analytic investigation of secondary traumatization. And the sample was really large, more than 4,000 participants from 32 samples. And again, the focus was on adaptation. Here were 3 main categories: mental health, measured by brief mental health index, for example, and there were many other measures. Psychopathology, again, well-known Beck's repression inventory, and again, well-known post-traumatic stress, impact of event scale, and other measures. What was the result? So these people were born after the war. They didn't have direct connection to wars, but their parents were mainly Holocaust survivors, 1 or 2 parents. So general adjustment, again, if we look at D, Cohen's D, is relatively small. And So almost the same as in a previous research. There were some statistical significant differences, but again, impact was really small, and it was in mental health measures and stress measures. So second generation of Holocaust survivors had a high level of stress and a high level of different mental health issues. But in reality, it would be expected that the impact would be relatively small. So again, the result was that there is relatively minimal problems in the second generation. The third generation study was done on third generation, and the sample was again relatively large, more than 1,000 participants and 13 non-clinical samples. So people with no depressions, no PTSD, no anxiety disorders were included. These researchers were interested in what they call externalizing. So aggression, conduct problems, aggression. The D size is very small. Again, we combine experimental sample with control sample, almost zero. Then they were interested in what they call internalizing, like peer support, fear, self-esteem, even eating problems. The result was almost zero, almost no differences between control sample and experimental sample. And they were interested in attachment, measured by different means, questionnaires, but also semi-structured interview. And again, the result was almost no differences. How is it possible? How is it possible that there is no strong impact in the first generation, in the second generation, and in the third generation? Before we try to answer this question, there is another support for good survive and good abilities of these people, first generation. Sociologist William Helmreich wrote influential textbook Against All Odds, Holocaust Survivors and the Successful Lives. And he conducted large research. He wrote more than 15,000 pages, focused on 170 in-depth interviews, long interviews, in average 2.5 hours. And he was interested in Shoah survivors in the United States. So people who after Second World War emigrated from countries like Ukraine, Czechoslovakia, Slovak Republic, and other countries. And he had a chance to speak with many of them. And his results were again surprising. He found flexibility, assertivity, toughness, optimistic orientation, intelligence, the ability to distance, awareness of belonging to a group, assimilation of knowledge, finding meaning in your own life, and courage. And he insists on that it might be because of some specific personality traits which enable them to survive. Also, that it might be a part, the direct impact of those severe traumas that they need to survive, that they should overcome big traumas from the war. And he also noticed transcendence, self-transcendence, tendency to survive and to set up new families, successful business in the States, and so on. So it seems that I can finish here, that there is no trauma transmission, everything is okay, but it's not like that, or maybe it's not like that. And maybe it's not like that because we have many different assessments and observations done by you, by psychotherapists. For the first generation, it was found that these people, first generation of Holocaust survivors, might be aggressive, that they are even aggressive to children. They are aggressive to spouses. Of course, it was found that PTSD and depression is prominent, that these people might suffer from paranoia. My grandmother, who survived the Holocaust, was paranoid without any doubts, and I remember how she was paranoid during my childhood. Difficulty expressing joy, another issue. These people suffer from what is called a lifelong psychic numbing, like that their emotions are flattened. They cannot express joy, and some of them have problems to express negative feelings too. Feelings of guilt, which might be connected to PTSD and depression. Psychotherapists found changes with age, like health checks in older age, which remind to Holocaust survivors something what was done in concentration camp during the war. But also psychotherapists notice economic success, large families, and contributing to society, like writing memoirs and so on. For the second generation, frequent search for psychological support of fantasy, persecution, intrusive thoughts was found. Again, paranoid features, self-isolation, provocativeness, manipulation, impulsivity problems. Issues like strange family relations, symbiotic family relations, ties which are very close together. They found also lower individuation rate, like depending on parents, increased dependence on parents. They found association between Holocaust speaking rate and psychopathology. If parents spoke too much about Holocaust, it impacted children negatively, but also the opposite, conspiracy of silence. They also found that second generation is not a homogeneous group, and that the emigration effect might be significant. It was found in several studies. For the third generation, identification with grandparents was found, and also psychotherapists distinguished whether one or two parents were affected by the Holocaust. Also activism, higher level of activism in the third generation was found, like that these young people are interested to become part of different Jewish and other generation. They are interested in climate issues, for example. There are some specific mechanisms in Holocaust survivors, and probably these are universal mechanisms, so it might be also valid for second generation of people who suffer war, like in Ukraine and in other parts of the world. The first mechanism is called non-integrated affection. And it's considered to be the most malignant component of transmission. And it's a gross, non-integrated affection that has never been processed by the survivor generation, and which was subsequently internalized by children at a different time and place. So survivor experienced something awful and he wasn't able to process it, and children feel that there is something what wasn't processed, and it might create problems. Conspiracy of silence was already mentioned. The most typical mechanism. Survivors didn't speak about it, or they started to speak about it at the end of their lives, or they wrote it into memoirs but were not able to speak about it loudly with their children and grandchildren. Another mechanism is the mechanism of over-opening. It's not so common, over-disclosure, but some Holocaust survivors spoke too much because of trauma. They had to speak about it. They have tendency to speak. They have initiation to speak about it, and it impacted children negatively. There is identification with the issue of Holocaust, with the role of Holocaust survivors, with previous life, and again, it might be uneasy then for children. There was so-called legitimization, a tendency to legitimize the past. So it's connected with the role, like the role of Holocaust survivor, participation in specific organizations, tendency to give some meaning to my life. There is also a typical mechanism which is called parentification. It's a bit strange, and it's exchanging the role, where a Holocaust survivor become to behave like a child, and the child become to behave like a parent. So there is an exchange of roles, which is again uneasy for children. How to explain the discrepancies between clinical findings and the outcome of large-scale data collection? There might be several explanations, like the method. Is it possible to ask about such awful issues like war traumas directly? How do we ask? Do we have enough time to ask, or we just read questionnaire items and want to hear yes or no? Also, samples are without any doubts important. Randomization versus clinic. Issues of status, categorization. If participants know that they are asked and that we know that they are survivors, and that we categorize them as survivors or not. So the question is, where is the truth? Are researchers true? Do they have the truth that there is almost no impact? Or we, psychotherapists, have this truth and that we know and we are sure that there is that impact? I would vote for a second option. I think that we are right if we are able to observe transgeneration traumas even decades after the war, and even in the second, third, and maybe other generations. Transgeneration therapy is interested in different phenomena, in different concepts, and probably some of them are quite self-explanatory and some of them not. I will just read them briefly and then I will try to explain them. Transgeneration transmission, the phantom in the script, psychoanalytic term, secrets, anniversary syndrome, invisible loyalty, entanglement, triangulation, parentification, already mentioned, replacement child, syndrome du Deurzen, survivor's guilt, Zeigarnik effect, class neurosis, what is called morphogenetic fields, epigenetics, and collective unconscious. I will speak briefly about these concepts. Transgeneration transmission, it's quite clear. It's the expectation that something might be transmitted to next generations. It's probably quite clear to us nowadays, psychotherapists, but it wasn't clear some decades ago. I remember what I was taught at school, at the university, and there was nothing about these issues. We were taught to learn about parents and the relationship between parents and children, but never about such issues. Phantom in the crypt, it's something that is strange. The gaps left within us by the secrets of others. It's a metaphor active within the unconscious, the barrier of an unspeakable fact within the loved one. So it's like it's a metaphor that shows us that some gap in previous lives of our ancestors, parents, grandparents, and so on, might metaphysically haunt us during our lives, unconsciously, of course. Secrets. Transgeneration therapy is full of thinking about secrets. Family secrets can influence even next generation. And Schutzenberger said what is transmitted without being assimilated processes because it was never verbalized and remains hidden among unspoken family. So transgeneration therapists are interested in secrets. There is anniversary syndrome, repetitive and unconscious of bad, terrible, unspeakable or even unthinkable traumas, and also happy events, repetitions of marriage dates. So we are connected to specific dates important in past, and sometimes we are unaware why in a specific date something bad, terrible or positive might happen. There is so-called invisible loyalty, characteristics and behavior, usually those which govern or impact our relationships with ourselves and others, which are passed down through generations, not by choice, but unconsciously, and often detrimentally, as unwitting homage to those who came before. So we might become loyal to something what happened in past, even if we are unaware about it. It might be connected to something which we do not know about something what happened to our grandparents, for example. There is a strange issue which is called entanglement, but it's quite simple. Trauma represents an entanglement with the past. We are drawn to our past. Entanglement phenomena are, by identification, by definition, non-local, and in this case express ties, entanglements with transgenerational memory. Triangulation, coined by Mary Bowen, family theorist, and it's about that two-person emotional system is unstable, and that under stress we have a tendency to form into a three-person system or triangle. So we might hear in stories of people in psychotherapy about these triangles, and it might be a sign of something what is traumatic from past. Parentification, we were already speaking about it. It's that reversal, role reversal, which is so uneasy for children. There is a replacement child concept, a child who is used by the parents as a substitute for a sibling who has died. And we can imagine parent projection into this replacement child and mess that might create in a child. There is a so-called syndrome du Deurzen, something from older literature, and it's automatic and transgenerational repair of one or more unjustified or unjustifiable death. So we have a tendency automatically repair something from past connected with death. There is what we know, survivor's guilt. It's not surprise for us that survivors might feel guilty. It's a mental condition that occurs when a person believes that have done something wrong by surviving a traumatic event. I could do something better. In that specific situation, if I would do this, then nothing would happen or something like that. Zeigarnik effect. It's from experimental psychology. It's from the beginning of 20th century. Tendency for interrupted tasks in some circumstances to be recalled better than completed tasks. So something what is unfinished. In transgenerational therapy, we speak about unfinished businesses from past, that it might be better recall from our memory. There is strange concept called class neurosis, double bind, which means that within poor or middle class families, the descendants are encouraged to do better. At the same time, they are asked to remain loyal to the original family. So there is double bind, something what is not expressed, and for descendants, it might create a messy message. There is a bit strange and a bit metaphysical concept called morphogenetic fields, a hypothetical biological and potentially social field that contains the information necessary to shape the exact form of a living thing as a part of its epigenetics, and may also shape its behavior and coordination with other beings. It's a bit mystical, but some therapists use it as a metaphor. There is also that large epigenetic fields which grow up so quickly, and we can hear about different pieces of research. Epigenetic research reflects an understanding that social challenges, environmental agents, and even dietary factors can alter the expression of a great number of genes without altering the genome itself. So epigenetics give us an information which we psychotherapists know that something important from previous generation might be transmitted to present generation, and even if it doesn't mean that there is a change in genes, it's about how genes are turned on or turned off. There is a well-known collective unconscious accumulation of instinctive memories and psychological material shared by members of a society, coined especially by Carl Gustav Jung. So practically, we are interested, we run through the family history like a red thread. So we hear stories, we listen to stories, and we are interested if there is something important, some kind of secret, something what goes through this specific family and previous generations. Transgeneration therapy is a more or less eclectic approach, and it's connected, of course, with psychoanalysis. Many therapists who wrote papers many decades ago were writing about these aspects, even without any knowledge about epigenetics. Of course, many psychodynamics therapists are interested in this approach. There are also specific approaches like psychodrama. Many transgeneration therapists involve psychodrama into treatment. Family therapy is very close to our approach. And of course, family constellations, Bert Hellinger and his followers. It's an interesting citation that psychotherapists who founded the transgeneration approach all share an Eastern European or Central European origin. It's a citation again from Anne and Celine Schutzenberg. There are potential transgeneration trauma issues we are interested in: family alliances, injustice, exclusion, changes of country, people who are missing, and our patients are not speaking about them, accident, disease, different kind of symptoms and psychological disorders, issues like repeated nightmares and content of these nightmares, early death, murder, tragic death, suicide, or crimes which are repeated. Or there are unprocessed grief our patients are speaking about in previous generations. There are issues like illegitimate birth, issues like miscarriage and abortion, different separations, betrayal, abandonment, issues of high level of power and sexual abuse, or issues of wrong religious, ideological, or political belongings. Issue of to be present in wars, disaster, famine, like in Ukraine in decades ago, and different kinds of failures. Technique of transgeneration therapy are techniques which we know from other therapies, like different imaginations. People draw coat of arms. They look at positive and negative legacy of their parents, for example. A psychodramatic technique, doubling, mirroring, role reversal, empty chair, so many us know about it. Issues like how to calm down using alternative tapping from EMDR approach. Different imaginative encounter with the inner child, ideal parents, adult self. surplus reality, which is about our imaginations, how it could be, how we can modulate our inner reality. And there is, of course, important technique called genosociogram, where we use different signs for male, for female, for adopted child, foster child, and so on. And then we draw genosociogram with a lot of signs. Here you can see circles for women, and here are triangles, not squares, for males. And many small notes are written there, and we are trying to create a picture and understand those red lines which goes through generation. I would like to finish my presentation with a few photos. It's there is many Ukraine immigrants in Visegrad group countries, in Poland, in Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, and Hungary. So it's good that even in these countries we have people who are interested in trauma and potential transmission of trauma. In Hungary, it was famous child psychologist Teres Virak, Holocaust survivor, who was very interested in issues done by Holocaust. Or nowadays, in present, psychologist Tihamer Bako and psychiatrist Katalin Zana, who wrote also this textbook published in Routledge, Transgeneration, Trauma and Therapy. In Poland, it was famous psychiatrist Maria Orvit, died in 2009. She was especially interested in the second generation. And in present, there is psychiatrist, psychotherapist, group analyst Katarzyna Prot-Klinger, who wrote many papers and several books about issues of second generation, transgeneration, transmission, processing of trauma in Poland. In Slovak Republic, it's an exception. There is no group of psychotherapists interested in impact of Holocaust, but fortunately there is ethnograph Peter Salner, who published many textbooks about ethnography of Holocaust survivors and second generation. In Czech Republic, I already mentioned Helena Klimová, Holocaust survivor who start with this everything what many other people follow. He was interested in Holocaust issues in second generation, then in the third generation. For many years, she led psychotherapeutic groups created by Holocaust survivors. So she is the most experienced person here in Czech Republic. And the last slide is a photo from our meeting in October 2023 in Prague. Tihamer Bako is here. Here is Katalin Zana, the co-author of that textbook I showed to you. Here is Monika Vrzgulová from Slovakia, ethnologist interested in Holocaust survivors. Here is Katarzyna Prot-Klinger, I'm sorry, from Poland, that therapist who is interested in, especially in second generation. And here is Michaela Hapalova from Raphael Institute, for many years interested in this topic too. Here are institutions where I am working. On the left side, National Institute of Mental Health, large research institution. On the right side, University of New York in the center of Prague in Londýnská Street, and down Jerusalem Synagogue. And on the left side, we have a small office where Raphael Institute provide its activities, which are oriented to training in trauma, but also in direct care. We have groups of Holocaust survivors and the second and the third generation. We also try to provide individual psychotherapy. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very glad that I had a chance to present it here.
Well, my profound thanks to you, Marek. You have given us the perfect presentation to begin our symposium with its title, The Transgenerational Transmission of Trauma and Recovery from Trauma. I feel actually very privileged to have heard your presentation this morning. I imagine I speak on behalf of everyone when I say I have learned a huge amount from your presentation to us, from your authority and knowledge and wisdom within your field. And my huge thanks to you for everything that you have said this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to say to everyone, we are recording the whole symposium, and Marek's presentation will be available in a few days' time, not immediately, but in a few days' time. The entire presentation and all of his PowerPoint will be available on the European Association for Psychotherapy website, the Ukrainian Psychotherapy Organization website, and also the Czech Psychotherapy Organization website. So you will be able to hear Marek's presentation again, and I can certainly speak for me. I will watch that again, Marek, because there is so much to learn from what you said. We don't have time for questions now. Questions will be taken in the round table, which happens this afternoon, and Marek will be present at the round table. Thank you very much for that, Marek. And if you wish to ask a question, you can write it in the chat. You could do that now while it's in your mind, and we will hold on to it and come back to it this afternoon. So you can write your questions in the chat, and we will take the written questions first in the round table, and then there will probably be some opportunity for spoken questions as well in the round table. I wish to thank our translators, because your presentation, Marek, was so full of content. It was so rich, but I imagine that for the translators, it was a very demanding work that you have just completed. So I thank our translators who are doing such amazing work, and that is Ivan and Anastasia and Franta. So thank you so much for making Marek's presentation available to everyone speaking English, speaking Ukrainian, speaking Czech. And I just wanted to add one thing before we move on to the next presentation. You mentioned a couple of times and stressed the damaging effects of silence and silencing people, so that instead of being able to process the trauma they've experienced, they feel silenced, and that silence becomes something that goes down the generations. The European Association for Psychotherapy has begun a project called the European Room for Listening, and its focus is to give a space for, at the moment, particularly Ukrainian psychotherapists who are experiencing the trauma of their work and situation, to be able to talk about what they're experiencing. And our hope in the European Room for Listening is that this helps reduce the transgenerational transmission of any trauma that they may be currently experiencing. So that's just some information for everyone. That's work that the European Association are doing at the moment. Marek, I'm going to say goodbye to you for now and look forward very much to seeing you in the round table this afternoon. And thank you again for your empowering and important words to us this morning. Bye-bye for now.